There's plenty of trade talk surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs and superstar forward Patrick Kane, but is it much more likely that the Leafs could be targeting two other Chicago Blackhawks players? What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. If you enjoy the content here, if you're new, if you've come here before and you're coming back again and you have not hit subscribe, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It takes about 2 seconds to do so. You can also like this video, and I'd be interested to hear your comments below about whether or not you think the Leafs should pursue these two defensemen from the Chicago Blackhawks, how they fit, and what you'd be willing to give up for them. So let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe on this channel and like this video. Let's get into today's topic, starting with the news breaking from Frank Seravalli that there's been tons of trade conversations with the Chicago Blackhawks from basically everyone around the league. To nobody's surprise, a lot of teams are calling about Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. But a couple of guys who've been mentioned here in discussion with the Toronto Maple Leafs have been Connor Murphy and Jake McCabe. And now Frank Seravalli reports that there have been calls from a couple of teams about those two guys to the Blackhawks, and those teams would include the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings, and of course the Toronto Maple Leafs. So as we approach the deadline, one of the needs that the fans, the media has identified for this Leafs team is bolstering that defensive end, whether it be to get a top four guy or a guy who can fit in the 5-6 and make everyone else more comfortable, or a guy who just naturally fits better defensively. It's on everybody's mind. How are they going to improve it, and can they improve it? Well, it looks like Kyle Dubas is making moves to try to get that to happen and try to fix that Leafs defensive end, the defensive core that they have right now. Kyle Dubas has apparently called the Chicago Blackhawks in regards to two defensemen, Jake McCabe and Connor Murphy. For those of you who don't know, we'll start with Jake McCabe. Jake McCabe is the higher profile player of these two, and for one big reason. The Chicago Blackhawks have reportedly been willing to accept taking on up to 50% of Jake McCabe's salary in a trade. Now, obviously, this would require the team who's trading for him to give up much more in the trade to them. But that being said, Jake McCabe right now, he's 29 years old. He's a left-handed defenseman. He's 6'1", 205 pounds. So he'd scratch the itch of Leafs fans looking for some big, heavy defenseman to come here, some veteran presence guy. He's defensively minded first, as he's not a quick skater. He's more of a stay at home, take away lanes, get in people's faces, win battles in the corners and in front of the net kind of guy. But most importantly, Jake McCabe is $4 million AAV through 2024-2025. So what does that mean? Well, it meets two separate criteria for this Leafs team. One, term. He's got a couple more years. And two, cost. $4 million isn't that bad to have to acquire, but the fact that you could get him down to $2 million, that is the cherry on top for this Leafs team. $2 million to acquire a left-handed defenseman who can come in, play heavy, play strong, win battles. That is a veteran-type guy that this Leafs team would like to acquire. Obviously, he's not an offensive guy. 2 goals, 12 assists so far on the season. He's got 25 penalty minutes, and it's about even for how much he draws to how much he takes, so it's fairly neutral in that aspect. And on a terrible Blackhawks team averaging 19 minutes and 20 seconds per night, the guy is a +2 so far on the season. As a defenseman, playing top pair minutes, to average out +2 on the season so far for a god-awful team that's going hard for Bedard right now, pretty good if you ask me. So that'll be pretty interesting. The other thing to note here with Jake McCabe, most importantly, I think, on top of all of this, he's got a no-trade clause. His no-trade clause includes every Canadian team except one, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Jake McCabe would be interested in coming here to Toronto. He spent time in Buffalo, likely familiar with the area, the city, everything like that. So I can't imagine he would be out of his comfort zone having to come here to Toronto. And the fact that he left them off of his no-trade list is a positive sign. Now, for either of these guys I'm going to discuss, it's hard for me to put a price tag on them. We saw what Ben Sherratt went for last year. Seems like that was a massive overpayment. We saw what Josh Manson went for, and he's a much better player than Sherratt. the gap in terms of what that could be is very confusing for me at this point in time. The other thing you see is what a guy like Bo Horvat goes for to the New York Islanders. It feels like it's not that much to have to give up to acquire that guy, but then you remember he's a UFA at the end of the year. The Islanders are out of a playoff spot. Maybe they're going to look to move him at the deadline if things aren't going well. There's a lot of factors, and the market this year feels very weird. It feels much more like a buyer's market, so they might have the upper hand. But that being said, as we approach the deadline, who knows where things will trend? Who knows how things will ultimately pan out at this deadline and for how expensive players will be. So Jake McCabe, obviously the top guy. The only problem I would have with a Jake McCabe trade here really is the fact that he's left-handed. And one thing to note if you are a Leafs fan watching this guy, a couple expectations. One, he is an injury-prone defenseman. He has dealt with some massive injuries in his career that have set him aside. Watching from the stands for an extended periods of time, there were some serious injuries. Now he's obviously back. He's played the majority of the games so far this season, but left-handed, injury-prone, not the greatest skater. So if we're going to get this guy, we need to expect he's not going to be the greatest getting out of situations. He often makes mistakes, coughing up pucks in bad situations because he can't skate himself out of things. So he would have to be paired up with a guy who he could leverage to be the puck-moving guy, be the mobile defenseman alongside of him. That being said, pretty good option all around. Now, option number 2 in all of this, Connor Murphy. Connor Murphy is also 29 years old, but he is a right-handed defenseman. He's 6'4", 212 pounds. And for Leafs fans, take a moment and just bask in that stat of height and weight there, because that is what Leafs fans are clamoring for at this deadline. We need size. 6'4", 212 pounds. That should about do it for Connor Murphy, but no reports I've seen on Chicago being willing to take his salary. That doesn't mean they aren't willing to, just haven't seen anything come out about that. And you also have to note, he has signed $4.4 million AAV through 2025-2026. So he's got a little bit extra term and a little bit extra money on his deal. And if Chicago is not going to be willing to take that, it might cost a lot more to convince them to knock it down, especially with a couple more years on his deal. So that is something to be aware of with Connor Murphy. Connor Murphy, through 48 games played, has 5 goals and 2 assists. So again, not an offensive defenseman here. He's got 42 penalty minutes on the season, so he's almost at a penalty a game if you average out the numbers there of, or a penalty every other game. So if you average out the numbers there of what he's been taking. -1 on the season, so very similar boat to Jake McCabe in terms of where he's at, playing defensively, playing in high-priority minutes on a terrible team. At 5v5, -1, pretty good for Connor Murphy so far through this season with the Chicago Blackhawks, and he's averaging 19 minutes and 28 seconds of ice time per night, which is below 20 minutes per night for the first season since 2018-2019 for him. And we also have to note here with a guy like Connor Murphy, he as well has had some injury issues. So if we're going to go gung-ho about, hey, we got to trade for these guys, just remember there is some risk that comes along with Jake McCabe and Connor Murphy of what they could bring or could bring with them in terms of baggage coming back to the Leafs team with some of these injuries that they've had prior to, and the fact that they could potentially get injured again. Connor Murphy does have a 10-team no-trade clause, have not been able to figure out who's on that list. That being said, he could obviously waive if he would like to go to a certain team, or if Chicago presents a team to him that he would have interested in. Both guys, McCabe and Murphy, 99 hits, 98 hits for the two of them. They're almost at 100 there. They're among the leaders on the Chicago Blackhawks in hits, so they're not going to blow you away with physicality and running guys through the wall, but they're averaging about 2 hits per night, so a little bit of a physical presence from both of them, both big guys. Connor Murphy, to me, is a little bit more of the player that we should be going for because of one thing: right-handed. Then the bonus on top of all this would obviously be that he's signed through 2025-2026, so that could be a good piece to have here in the future years as a guy who could be a little bit of a rock back there if things work out with him. It's going to be a little bit difficult if Chicago's not interested in taking on salary. It is a longer contract, so a longer time that they'd have to eat that for. But that being said, it's not like it's not doable. It could be something that the Blackhawks could see value in, a return coming the other way, whether it be in picks and prospects. So Leafs fans, let me know what you think about these two guys below. If either of them pique your interest as players that you'd be willing to go out and trade for, what would you trade for them? I'd be interested to know that. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. You can turn on notifications by clicking that bell so you get notified every time we do post-game live streams, as well as when videos like this come out. We'll be breaking down all the news, injuries, the rumors surrounding this team, and of course trades when they happen here on this channel. So please make sure to subscribe, hit like on this video. It is greatly appreciated. It helps us get out there more. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope to see everyone soon. Keep a Leafin'.